If you think discipline alone will make you rich, you are about to waste years of your life repeating a religious chant instead of facing the mechanics of money. The cruel part is this: the world runs on incentives, leverage, and control, not on whether you can wake up early. This is not financial advice, this is financial education. In 2026, everyone is hearing the same syrupy message: work harder, be consistent, control yourself. And yes, self control matters. But here is the truth nobody says out loud, because it ruins the comfort industry. Most people do not lose because they lack discipline. They lose because they are aiming their discipline at the wrong battlefield. And even when they pick the right battlefield, they still get crushed by systems designed to harvest everyone else while letting the few compound in peace. You are anxious right now. You are watching artificial intelligence swallow middle-class jobs faster than anyone in 2020 wanted to admit. You are seeing inflation cool on paper while your paycheck buys less than it did in 2019. You are watching housing prices detach from wages like gravity got turned off. And you are seeing the stock market climb toward new highs while real people quietly cut back, juggle bills, and pretend it is fine. So today, I am going to talk about extreme self-discipline, but not in the motivational way. I am going to connect it to what is actually happening to you in 2026. How your attention gets hijacked, how your income gets capped, how your effort becomes someone else's product, how your so-called freedom gets leased back to you by landlords, lenders, employers, and platforms. And by the end, you will understand why discipline without direction is just suffering with better branding. You probably heard the old story. People say the difference between rich and normal is effort and self-control. They act like rich people are born with a secret muscle. But let me ask you a cold question. If hard work and discipline were the entire equation, why would there be entire towns full of hardworking people who still struggle to cover rent? Why would there be so many people who obey every rule and still end up one accident away from bankruptcy? Picture a nurse in her 30s named David. He works nights, he shows up on time, he picks up extra shifts. He tries to eat healthy. He tries to go to the gym. He does everything a self-improvement guru would applaud. Yet his rent has doubled in the last 5 years in his city. His insurance premiums went up so fast it felt personal. His student loans are a shadow that never moves, and his savings account keeps shrinking even when he is being responsible. Now imagine telling David that the reason he is broke is that he needs more self-discipline. He might even believe you because nobody wants to admit the system is rigged. But the real reason David is stuck is not that he lacks willpower. It is that his discipline is being consumed by a structure that extracts value from his time and gives him back fixed wages while costs climb. He is disciplined, but he is not empowered. He is controlling his behavior, but he has no control over the game. And here is the part that makes people angry, because it demolishes their self-respect in one paragraph. When you are working for a paycheck, your discipline often just helps you stay eligible. It helps you avoid being replaced by someone cheaper, or someone faster, or something that does your task with no coffee breaks. Your discipline becomes a checkbox on a corporate spreadsheet. In 2026, with artificial intelligence tools everywhere, that spreadsheet is even more ruthless. They will tell you that artificial intelligence is changing the market and you must adapt, but most people hear that and panic into doing the same things with different titles. Learn to code, they said in 2020. That advice aged like milk. In 2026, the average person can prompt an AI assistant to write functioning code, produce basic software, draft a marketing funnel, analyze spreadsheets, and generate entire drafts of content. Most humans were never competing with humans. They were competing with the illusion that they were special in a labor market that is being automated in layers. So yes, self-discipline is still required, but not for the reason people think. You need discipline to survive manipulation. You need discipline to protect your attention. You need discipline to build leverage. You need discipline to keep moving in a direction that actually multiplies your future. Without that, discipline becomes a cage. Now let's talk about direction. The old wisdom says, chase your passion. The new reality says, you chase your cash flow. And the difference is not romantic, it is mechanical. There is an example that is almost too obvious, but it proves the point. Selling fences to neighbors does not scale the same way as selling software to the world. One job has a ceiling shaped like your local street. The other has a ceiling shaped like global demand. And yet people keep trying to become rich by working like they are selling fences. When you hear about billionaires, you notice their discipline, but you rarely notice their selection. They picked markets where scale exists. They picked products where demand keeps compounding. They picked structures where their actions affect not just one person's day, but thousands of people's decisions. Self-discipline is part of it, but it is not the origin. The origin is direction. In 2026, direction is harder to find because the platforms, the algorithms, and the job descriptions are all designed to confuse you. Your job posting is written to sound like a life mission, but it is a treadmill. Your creator economy dream is marketed as freedom, but most creators make $0 after paying for equipment, editing software, and time. The world sells you the image of passive income while quietly shifting risk onto you. You become the laborer, and the platform becomes the owner. So here is your cliffhanger for the first act. You can have discipline and still fail. Why? Because discipline is just the engine. If you drive it toward a wall, it does not matter how steady your foot is on the gas. And here is where the story gets truly ugly. The reason most people do not change is not that they are lazy. It is that they are emotionally managed. They are shaped by incentives they did not choose. Let's talk about what actually controls behavior. There is a simple framework you can use without pretending it is spiritual. Human action is driven by desire and fear. Desire pulls you toward rewards. Fear prevents you from consequences. Both are powerful, and both can be weaponized. Think about your mornings. Why do you sometimes fail to wake up? It is not because you are morally weak. It is because your brain does not feel the reward is real. If the reward is distant or uncertain, you drift back into what feels safe now. And what feels safe now in 2026 is stimulation, phones, short videos, infinite scroll, artificial novelty. They say you need discipline, but the smartphone in your pocket is already trained to take your discipline away. One notification and your brain breaks its focus like it is glass. So you end up with two competing forces. Your goals are quiet, your distractions are loud, your ambitions whisper, the algorithm shouts. You are not failing because you lack willpower. You are failing because you are surrounded by engineered triggers that pull on your attention every few minutes like a slot machine. And yes, you can be disciplined, but you must learn discipline with a modern enemy. Now, I want you to picture something specific. A person starts a new routine. She decides to work on her business every morning, maybe 2 hours before the day begins. She buys a planner. She even sets the alarms. She does the discipline thing. Then, in the middle of that 2 hours, she checks her messages, not because she needs to, because she wants to feel informed, because she wants to be helpful, because she wants to avoid missing out. She tells herself it is just one glance, but the glance turns into 10 minutes, then 30, then an entire morning is gone. This is the modern tragedy. The goal was not hard. The environment made the goal expensive, and the environment is not neutral. This is also why inflation feels like a personal insult. The cost of everything goes up, but your life stays designed to keep you distracted. Your employer may not raise wages as fast as expenses. Your landlord does not negotiate with your feelings. Your bank charges fees without caring if you are stressed, and the Fed changes rates based on macro numbers, while your mortgage or credit card APR changes in your kitchen right when you are trying to pay groceries. When rates go up, debt becomes heavier. When rates go down, prices often do not immediately fall. That is the long-term damage. Even if inflation comes down on paper, your purchasing power may not recover the way you were promised. You can do everything right and still feel behind, because the baseline moved. Now here is the next cliffhanger, and it is important. The same psychological tools that keep you checking your phone also keep you emotionally compliant when money gets tight. You become more reactive. You make worse decisions. You chase quick wins. You accept lower quality work because it feels safer than uncertainty, and then you call it realism. And here is where self-discipline must upgrade, not just discipline of habits, discipline of cognition, discipline of what you allow into your mind. In 2026, cognition is the battleground. Artificial intelligence does not only replace tasks, it replaces choices. It can generate content, automate emails, draft customer responses, and analyze patterns. For many jobs, the output is no longer scarce. What becomes scarce is judgment and access to capital and relationships. So if you are still chasing hard work as if the labor itself is valuable, you are late to the new reality. Now, let's talk about a method for extreme self-discipline that is both practical and brutal. You do not rely on motivation. You engineer your environment so that temptation becomes inconvenient. It sounds simple, but most people resist it because it requires admitting a weakness. You cannot think your way out of a habit you refuse to confront. Your brain will always bargain. It always tells you just for today, just a little longer, just one more scroll. So instead, you create friction. You make the wrong action harder and the right action easier. You might put your phone in a drawer. You might leave it in another room. You might remove certain apps entirely. You might schedule message checks at a fixed time, not whenever your anxiety asks you to soothe yourself. And I know what you are thinking. You think you need the phone for work. Fine. Then you use a system where the phone is not a master. You treat it like a tool, not like a toy. You do not get to claim freedom while renting your attention to other people's incentives. Here is a micro story that will sting. Imagine someone obsessed with news. Every day, all day, he checks headlines, sports updates, politics clips, business commentary. The feed never ends. He tells himself it keeps him informed, but the truth is, half the content is designed to provoke emotion, and provoked emotion makes your focus weak. One day, he realizes his phone use is eating his life. It is not minutes here and there. It is hours. It is a tax. He deletes the news apps. Not because he hates information, because he hates the way the information industry sells anxiety. Then, if he truly wants to read something, he must reinstall it. He must make a conscious effort. And guess what happens? Most of the time he does not reinstall. Not because he became a monk, because the friction stops the autopilot. In 2026, that autopilot is the real enemy. Artificial intelligence makes the world faster. Faster means your attention gets monetized faster. And the people who benefit from your attention do not care if you are stressed. They care if you click. Now, let's escalate. There is another layer beyond friction, and it is nastier. You can use desire and fear on purpose. Most self-discipline advice ignores that people are addicts, not in a dramatic movie way, in a simple behavioral way. If something triggers your brain's reward system, it becomes something you want even when it destroys your outcomes. So you need a plan to manage that wanting. One approach is to name your temptations like they are characters, not as a joke, as a control strategy. You create a mental label for the parts of you that sabotage your future. Think of it like creating a roster of your own weaknesses so they are visible. People love symbols because symbols bypass debate. When a problem is abstract, you argue with it. When it is concrete, you follow it. That is why athletes put reminders on walls and why writers put schedules above their desks. Your brain needs hooks. Now, I want you to connect this with modern money, because money is psychological. When you feel behind, you seek comfort. When you seek comfort, you spend. When you spend, you do not invest. When you do not invest, you fall further behind. Then you blame yourself and call it a character flaw. This cycle is not personal, it is economic. Housing is the clearest example. Rent increases when wages do not rise. Mortgage rates can jump and keep your monthly payment higher for years. In the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and the United States, more families are stuck in rental dependence, and a lot of them are trapped in communities where moving is too expensive. Climate disruption adds another layer. Insurance markets are collapsing in some regions. Floods and wildfires are not just headlines. They drive migration costs and push people into new expenses they cannot budget for. Now imagine telling someone in that situation that they just need to be disciplined. They might work harder and still lose. That does not mean discipline is useless. It means direction and leverage matter more than the fantasy that willpower alone conquers a rigged system. And that brings us to the hardest truth. Sometimes you can do everything right and still fail, because you were assigned a low-output strategy. Let me be specific. In the past, a person could join a company, work for decades, and ride a retirement system built on stable demographics and predictable markets. In 2026, the retirement age keeps getting pushed back. Social Security faces funding pressure, and people feel it in their bones. Pensions are underfunded in many regions and sectors, and people with savings find their portfolios exposed to market swings while their expenses continue to rise. Meanwhile, the wealthy do not play the same game. They can borrow against assets at interest rates that may be cheaper than the cost of your debt. They can shift income. They can access financial instruments that protect them from inflation in ways that your paycheck cannot. So the question is not simply, are you disciplined? The question is, do you have a strategy that the system rewards? Here is the second act, and it gets darker. The economy increasingly rewards people who can manage themselves mentally, not just people who can do tasks. Self-discipline is not only about getting up early, it is about what your mind believes in the moment when your future depends on patience. It is about refusing to panic. It is about resisting emotional purchases when your bank account is stressed. It is about not chasing influencers who sell dreams while their own earnings are zero. In 2026, social media is a factory of false agency. It tells you you can become financially free by copying a routine, joining a course, and following a template. Most of those creators do not show the months they made nothing. They do not show the debts. They do not show that the average viewer is not built for the hustle they market. And while you are trying to self-improve your way out of financial insecurity, the wealth concentration accelerates. According to widely reported global wealth studies, the top 1% owns an increasingly large share of total wealth. That is not just a vague headline, it means the compounding effect shifts upward. When the wealthy invest, they have more capital, more buffers, and more time. When you invest, you have less room for error. So your discipline must become capital discipline, attention discipline, risk discipline. Now I want to talk about a concept that feels almost offensive because it contradicts the comfort story. The goal is not to become the kind of person who works hard. The goal is to become the kind of person who can maintain behavior under stress. Because stress is where people break. Stress is where they violate their own rules. Stress is when they abandon plans, trade long-term thinking for immediate relief, and choose short-term spending over long-term security. In 2026, stress is everywhere. Interest rates can stay high or shift based on the Fed's decisions. When rates rise, debt costs rise. When they fall, inflation expectations can shift and assets can reprice. Either way, ordinary people feel it first through their mortgages, their credit cards, and their rent. And this is where you understand the real dark truth. Most discipline content assumes life is stable enough for discipline to pay off. But in unstable times, discipline without systems just makes you suffer more efficiently. So you need 3 upgrades. First, direction. You need to aim your work at strategies with leverage, not just more hours. More leverage. Second, environment. You need to remove friction from the right actions and add friction to the wrong ones. Third, emotional control. You need to manage desire and fear deliberately so they do not hijack you through autopilot. Now, let's make it practical and painfully real. When you set a goal, you must also set the triggers that tempt you into failure. You write down what your brain does when you feel tired, bored, anxious, or lonely. You write down which apps you open first. You write down which shortcuts you take when you want quick dopamine. Then you design a barrier. This is not self-help. This is engineering. For example, if your temptation is your phone during work sessions, you leave your phone away. Put it where you cannot reach it instantly. You schedule responses at specific times. You treat interruptions like meetings with consequences. Because interruptions are not free. They steal cycles of attention, and in a high-information era, attention is a finite asset. If your temptation is food when you are stressed, you change the environment. You do not rely on willpower. You stop stalking the trigger. You plan meals. You choose routines that make default behavior align with your goal. And yes, exercise is a discipline practice, but it is also a nervous system regulator. It helps your mind tolerate discomfort instead of demanding a chemical shortcut. Now, the story continues. Extreme self-discipline can look like punishment to outsiders. That is fine. Outsiders are not living inside your budget, inside your anxiety, inside your responsibility. Your discipline is not for them. It is for you. There is another method people overlook. Create unnecessary complexity for bad habits. Sounds stupid, but it works because it interrupts the automatic loop. Imagine a gamer who realizes his phone has become a time leak. He watches himself play 5 to 6 hours a day and then wonders why his life is not moving. He decides to remove the app. But he also knows he might reinstall. So instead,